Why do arrows have to be flexible? And what's the meaning of the number on the side of the arrow?
I'm Nishimura, and I'm a recurve archer. In the next set of videos, we'll be delving into the daunting task of selecting arrows, from distilling what are the spines of the arrow, budgeting, brands, and maintenance of arrows. If you're in the market for new arrows, how do you know which arrows will work best for you in your current step of your archery journey? If you're in the market for new arrows, you will encounter this arrow parameter, arrow spine. So let's start there. What is arrow spine? In a nutshell, the spine of an arrow is the measure of how flexible an arrow is at rest. When you see a spine number, what we are most often referring to is static spine. An arrow is graded numerically in thousandths of an inch. 400 arrow spine bends 0.4 inches when load is applied. 1000 arrow spine bends a full inch, and so on. So the higher the number, the more flexible the arrow. Arrow spine refers to the deflection or the degree to which the arrow bends when a specific load is applied at the center of the shaft, with the arrow supported by 2 points 28 inches apart. By convention, this weight is 1.94 pounds or 880 grams. There are larger industrial spine testers, but I've been using this one by Bear Paw Products. It's a digital spine tester. It first measures the weight of the arrow and then asks me to push and bend the arrow, and it gives me the rating. I turn the arrow at different angles and push it again to try to find what is roughly the average and what is the alignment of the spine for the numbers I really need them to be. But then you'd ask, why would I even want my arrow to be flexible? Well, that's a great question. If we try to shoot an arrow that has no flexibility at all, a hypothetical zero spine arrow, the arrow will simply not fly straight. It is too stiff, would not clear the riser and bounce off of it. The arrow needs to bend to absorb the energy from the bowstring while maintaining the direction to the target. And to do that, the arrow needs to bend around the riser. And in this sense, the idiom straight as an arrow basically changes its meaning. It's the archer's paradox. Movies get a bad rep, as they often portray archery very poorly. In the movie Brave, there is a scene with an archery contest and the winner would take Merida's hand in marriage. And she enters the contest herself, and the last shot of the day shows exactly how the arrow flies out of the riser. There. In this exact moment, the portrayal of the arrow is so spot on. You can see the arrow bending around the riser, then bending back to correct itself. This is just an animation, but it's very close to reality. With a 1000 frames per second video, you can see a modern carbon arrow flying, curving around the riser, then correcting itself. There's the wobble side to side that shows the archer's paradox. In this other video, you can see a modern plunger in action, where very minimally it compresses at the moment of release. And the effect is the same. Modern arrows still bend. What we care about is how the arrow flies, and that's dynamic spine. The dynamic spine is not measured in numbers as much as if the arrow is stiff, weak, or in tune. Dynamic spine varies depending on how long the arrow is, how thick the arrow is, the payload at the point of the arrow, the plunger tension, and how much force the arrow is getting pushed with.
This is what we call the draw weight, and this is not the number on your limbs, but the weight at the fingers at full draw. For recurve bows, other than swapping out with different limbs, we can change the draw weight by adjusting the tiller bolts. Unscrewing about half a turn on each limb corresponds to about half a pound depending on your limbs. To determine if your arrow's dynamic spine is in tune with your bow, you typically shoot flesh shafts and bear shafts from the same distance, about 30 meters away. The flesh shafts will group, and the bear shafts will veer to one side or the other. In this case, the bear shafts are both really high and to the left. So the first thing is to adjust my nocking point, which is too low. So I'll add some more material at the bottom to make it higher. Then I adjusted my tiller bolts. Now it's a little bit too strong because the bear shafts are to the right. After some final adjustments, both bear shafts and flesh shafts are groupy, meaning they're in tune.
Why is payload important? The amount of weight at the point is important because if the payload is too much, the arrow would compress and possibly hit the riser on its way out. If the payload is too little, the arrow may not compress at all and act like a stiff arrow and bounce off the riser.
I'll demonstrate this using a stiff wire and some weights. If there's too much weight at the end of the arrow will bend too much and it'll be difficult to control. If there's not enough weight, the arrow does not compress and it's also difficult to control. What we want is just enough weight so we can push the payload and control its direction.
To select your point weight, a good place to start is 120 grains. That's right, grains, like grains of rice.
Points are typically made out of metal. This one's made out of stainless steel and weighs 120 grains. This other point is made out of tungsten and is also 120 grains and is much more compact. Having a more compact point ensures that the arrow's bend doesn't get affected by the point. Whenever assembling arrows, we always use hot melt because sometimes we want to adjust the point weight. Some points like this one, it starts at just under 100 grains and it has a snap-off end so I can actually adjust it. The breakaway part weighs just under 20 grains. This makes this point an 80 grain point.
I'm sacrificing some of my arrows for this video to illustrate what happens with dynamic spine when we cut the arrows at different lengths. There are limits to this because on one hand, we can't cut the arrows too short because that becomes dangerous. And on the other hand, if the arrow is too long, it will not fly correctly either. For this test, what we're gonna do is I cut the arrows to 3 different lengths. I have the same payload at the point, 200 grains. I'll start with the longest one and we'll take it from there.
To set an initial clicker position, I am doing clicker control drills. Always do these pointing to a target in an abundance of caution, safety first, and keep adjusting until the clicker goes off. It's important to always remember to bring the string to your face, do not move your head. The arrow comes to you.
Looks like a good spot.
For these, we're not worried about hitting the center. Do not move your sight. Just keep aiming to the same spot.
These fleshed arrows are over here and the bear shafts all the way over there. That means the dynamic spine for these is way too weak because to the right, I'm a right-handed archer, way to the right. This other set I cut 1 3/4 inches shorter. You can see that they're still too soft. Way to the right. This one, I think the hook was in an odd angle. Let's go down to even shorter arrows and see how they fly. So the same weight for the bow, same payload at the end of the arrows. Now our bear shaft is quite a bit to the left. So I need to add more weight to this bow for these arrows to work here. All right, going back to the arrows that I got 1 3/4 inches.
With the medium length arrows, they were registering weak, which means I need to remove some weight by unscrewing the tiller bolts.
1, 2 turns. That's 1 and 2 full turns.
This might still look a little bit weak, and my knocking point does appear to be a little bit low because the bear shafts are high, but considering that we are just testing the arrow lengths and how that impacts dynamic spine, this is a result.
I hope you have learned a little bit more about arrows and arrow components, so next time you are selecting arrows, you'll be a little bit more informed when making your selection. I have a couple other videos covering budgeting for arrows and arrow maintenance, so if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to subscribe and comment in this video and help out this channel. I'm Nishimura, and until next time, keep aiming for gold.